What happens when a seasoned television host decides to test the limits of royal composure on live television? The answer became crystal clear during what was supposed to be a routine, promotional appearance that spiraled into television chaos. Prince Harry had arrived at the studio that morning, expecting the usual softball questions about his latest charity initiative. The View had always been relatively friendly territory for celebrity guests, and his media team had briefed him on the typical format. What they hadn't prepared him for was Joy Behar in one of her most confrontational moods. Make sure to subscribe and comment below, because this story gets absolutely wild. The prince settled into his chair, adjusting his tie nervously as the cameras rolled. The bright studio lights felt hotter than usual, and he could sense something different in the atmosphere. Joy Behar sat across from him with that familiar, mischievous glint in her eye that regular viewers knew meant trouble was brewing. So Prince Harry Joy began, leaning forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Let's talk about your new environmental project. You've been very vocal about climate change, flying around the world to speak at various events. Tell me, how many private jets did you take last month alone? Harry's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the opening question he'd been expecting. His media training kicked in as he attempted to deflect with charm. Well, Joy, I think the important thing is the message we're trying to convey about protecting our planet for future generations, he replied, his accent carrying that practiced, diplomatic tone. Oh, absolutely. Joy nodded, her voice dripping with mock sincerity, and nothing says protecting the planet quite like burning fossil fuels at 30,000 feet. But let's move on to something even more interesting. Your wife Meghan has been quite busy with her various projects. How does it feel to be the plus one in your own marriage? The studio audience gasped audibly. Even the other co-hosts looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances that seemed to say they hadn't seen this line of questioning coming either. Harry's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his royal training held firm. I'm incredibly proud of my wife's accomplishments, he said carefully, and I think partnership means supporting each other's individual pursuits. Partnership, Joy repeated, savoring the word like it left a bad taste in her mouth. That's an interesting way to put it, because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like you traded one palace for another kind of prison, at least at Buckingham Palace. You had actual power. Now you're what, exactly? A Hollywood house husband? The tension in the studio was palpable now. Camera operators zoomed in slightly, sensing they were capturing something special. Harry's hands gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles beginning to show white against his skin. I think you're mischaracterizing the situation, Harry said, his voice taking on a harder edge despite his attempts to remain diplomatic. My wife and I work as a team, and we've built something meaningful together in America. Built something meaningful, Joy laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. You mean like your Netflix deal that's produced exactly what, or maybe the Spotify contract that got canceled faster than a bad sitcom? Face it, Harry, you're living off your royal name while simultaneously trashing the institution that gave it to you any value in the first place. That's not accurate, Harry replied, his composure beginning to crack. We've been very clear about our reasons for stepping back from royal duties, and it had nothing to do with wanting to profit from our titles. Oh, please, Joy waved dismissively. You stepped back because you couldn't handle the pressure, and now you're trying to have it both ways. You want all the perks of being royal without any of the responsibilities. It's like quitting your job and then expecting them to keep paying your salary. The other co-hosts tried to jump in, sensing the interview was veering into dangerous territory, but Joy was just getting started. And let's talk about your family, she continued relentlessly. You've spent the past few years publicly airing your grievances about people who can't exactly defend themselves, haven't you? I mean, what kind of man throws his own father and brother under the bus for a payday? Harry's facade finally began to crumble. His face flushed red, and when he spoke, his voice carried an unmistakable tremor of rage. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, leaning forward in his chair. You have no idea what my family and I have been through, what we've had to endure. Endure. Joy's eyebrows shot up dramatically. Oh, honey, you're a millionaire. Prince living in a Montecito mansion. What exactly are you enduring? Having to actually work for a living like the rest of us? The studio fell silent except for the low hum of the cameras. Harry stared at Joy with barely contained fury, his breathing visible and labored. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "You think this is funny, don't you? You think my pain, my family's pain, is just entertainment for your audience. I think," Joy replied coolly, "that you've made your pain into entertainment yourself. The difference is, I'm not pretending to be noble while I do it." Harry's hands were trembling now, and everyone in the studio could see it. The prince, who had once served in Afghanistan, who had faced actual combat, was being systematically dismantled by a 70-something television host with a sharp tongue and zero patience for royal privilege. "You want to talk about noble?" Harry's voice rose slightly, his accent thickening with emotion. "Let me tell you about noble. Noble is serving your country in war zones while your family sits safely in their palaces. Noble is trying to protect your wife and children from the same machine that killed your mother." Joy didn't even blink. If anything, she seemed energized by his obvious distress. "Oh, here we go with the mother card," she said, rolling her eyes. "Theatrically, Harry, your mother died in a car accident over 25 years ago. At some point, you have to stop using that tragedy as an excuse for every poor decision you make." The gasp from the studio audience was audible this time. Even the camera crew seemed shocked. One of the other co-hosts tried to intervene. "Joy, maybe we should what?" Joy cut her off sharply. "Pretend like he hasn't been dining out on his mother's death for decades? Diana was a lovely woman, but she's not here to defend herself from being used as emotional blackmail every time her son needs sympathy." Harry shot to his feet so quickly his chair rolled backward. For a moment, it looked like he might actually storm off the set. His face was crimson, his chest heaving with barely controlled fury. "How dare you?" he said, his voice shaking. "How dare you speak about my mother like that? You didn't know her? You don't know what she went through, what we went through." "Sit down, Harry," Joy said calmly, as if she were speaking to a petulant child. "You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself?" Harry's voice cracked with incredulous rage. "You just mocked my dead mother on national television, and I'm the one embarrassing myself." "I didn't mock anyone," Joy replied smoothly. "I pointed out that you've turned your mother's memory into a career move. There's a difference, though. I can see why you might not want to acknowledge it." Harry remained standing, swaying slightly as if the ground beneath him had shifted. The other co-hosts were frantically signaling to the producers, but the cameras kept rolling. This was television, gold, and everyone knew it. "You're a disgusting human being," Harry said quietly, but his words carried clearly through the studio microphones. Joy's smile widened. She had him exactly where she wanted him. "And you're a spoiled little boy who never grew up," she shot back. "You think because you were born into privilege, the world owes you something. Well, newsflash, Prince, nobody cares about your feelings. We all have problems. The difference is, most of us don't write tell-all books about our daddy issues." "Stop," Harry said, his voice breaking. "Just stop." "Stop what?" "Telling the truth. You came on this show to promote your latest project, but what you're really selling is the same old sob story. Poor little rich boy Harry, so misunderstood, so victimized by the mean old royal family that gave him everything he ever had." Harry's breathing was becoming labored. He looked around the studio desperately, as if searching for an escape route, or perhaps someone who might come to his defense. The other co-hosts were staring at him with a mixture of pity and fascination, but nobody moved to help him. "You know what I think?" Joy continued relentlessly. "I think you're angry because deep down you know I'm right. You've built your entire adult life on being the victim, and you can't stand it when someone calls you on it." "That's not true," Harry whispered, but even he seemed to realize how weak it sounded. "Isn't it? Let's look at the facts. You had a privileged upbringing, a military career that was carefully managed to keep you safe, a royal wedding watched by millions, and enough money to last several lifetimes. But somehow, you're the victim in all of this. Somehow, everyone else is to blame for your choices." Joy leaned back in her chair, looking utterly satisfied with herself. She had taken apart a member of the British royal family on live television, and she was clearly enjoying every second of it. "Here's what I don't understand," she continued, her voice taking on a mock concerned tone. "If your family is so terrible, if the royal institution is so corrupt and damaging, why do you still use your title? Why not just be Harry Mount Windsor, private citizen? Why hold on to Prince Harry if it's caused you so much pain? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Harry opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time since the interview began, he seemed genuinely speechless. I'll tell you why, Joy answered her own question. Because without that title, you're just another mediocre, middle-aged man with opinions. The title is the only thing that makes anyone care what you have to say. Harry finally sat back down, but he looked defeated. His shoulders slumped, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You don't understand, he said. None of you understand what it's like to live in that world. You're right, Joy agreed mockingly. I don't understand what it's like to have servants and palaces and never worry about money. It sounds absolutely terrible. It is terrible, Harry said, and for a moment his voice carried such genuine pain that even Joy seemed momentarily taken aback. You have no idea what it's like to have your entire life planned out for you, to never be able to make your own choices. To watch the people you love being destroyed by a system that cares more about tradition than humanity. But Joy recovered quickly. So you left, she said simply. You made your choice. You can't have it both ways, Harry. You can't escape the system and then spend years complaining about it for profit. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Harry stared at Joy with a mixture of hatred and something that looked almost like respect for her ruthlessness. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. Gone was the diplomatic prince, replaced by something raw and dangerous. You want to know the truth about having it both ways? Harry said, his voice low and menacing. Fine. Let me tell you about having it both ways. You sit here every day, tearing apart people you've never met, profiting off other people's misery, and then you go home to your comfortable life feeling superior. Tell me, Joy, how is that any different from what you're accusing me of? Joy's smile faltered for the first time. She hadn't expected him to fight back with such precision. I'm a talk show host, she said defensively. It's literally my job to ask tough questions. Is it your job to be cruel? Harry shot back, leaning forward aggressively. Is it your job to mock dead mothers and make money off humiliating guests? Because that's what you just did. And you did it with a smile on your face. The dynamic in the studio had shifted dramatically. Suddenly, Joy was the one on the defensive, and Harry had found his footing again. You want to talk about privilege? Harry continued, his voice gaining strength. You've been on television for decades, making millions by judging other people's lives. You've never had to serve your country, never had to sacrifice anything for anyone else, never had to live under the kind of scrutiny you just subjected. Me too. But somehow, I'm the privileged one. Joy tried to interrupt, but Harry wasn't finished. And you want to lecture me about using my mother's memory? Every time you mention her death for ratings, every time you bring up her tragedy to score points against me, you're doing exactly what you accuse me of. The difference is, she was my mother. What's your excuse? The other co-hosts were frozen, watching this reversal with fascination. Joy, for once in her career, seemed genuinely rattled. I was making a point about, she began. You were being vicious, Harry cut her off sharply. And the worst part is, you enjoyed it. I could see it in your eyes. You got off on trying to break me down on national television. Joy's face flushed red. I don't get off on anything. I'm doing my job. Your job is to interview guests, not to psychologically torture them, Harry replied coldly. What you just did wasn't journalism, it was cruelty for entertainment. And you call me the one who profits off pain? The accusations were hitting their mark. Joy shifted uncomfortably in her chair, no longer the predator, but suddenly looking very much like prey. You think you're so much better than me, Harry continued relentlessly. But at least when I talk about my family, I'm talking about my own life, my own experiences. You just spent 20 minutes tearing apart people you've never met, relationships you know nothing about, pain you've never experienced. How is that noble? How is that serving any purpose other than your own ego? I'm holding you accountable, Joy said weakly, but even she seemed to realize how hollow it sounded. Accountable for what? For leaving a situation that was destroying my mental health and my family. For choosing my wife and children over an institution. For refusing to be a performing monkey for people like you. Harry stood up again, but this time he wasn't fleeing. He was towering over Joy with the bearing of someone who had finally remembered who he was. You want to know what accountability looks like? he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone born to command. Accountability is admitting when you've crossed a line. Accountability is recognizing that behind every public figure is a human being with feelings and limits. Accountability is not hiding behind your job description when you choose to be unnecessarily cruel. Joy looked around desperately for support from her co-hosts, but they were all staring at Harry with something approaching. He had completely turned the tables. "I came here to talk about a charity project," Harry said, his voice now eerily calm. "Something designed to help children in need. Instead, you decided to make it about my personal life, my marriage, my dead mother. You turned what should have been a conversation about helping others into a public execution for your own amusement." He paused, letting that sink in before delivering his final blow. "You asked me earlier why I still use my title if the royal family caused me so much pain. Here's your answer. Because despite everything, I was raised to believe that with privilege comes responsibility. That if you're given a platform, you use it to help others, not to tear them down. Clearly, that's a lesson you never learned." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in decades of television, she was completely speechless. Harry straightened his jacket and looked directly into the camera. "The charity I came here to promote works with children who have lost parents in conflict zones. Children who will never have the luxury of grieving publicly or writing books about their pain. Children who just need help. If anyone watching wants to learn more about that, instead of this circus, the information is available online." He turned back to Joy one last time. "As for having it both ways, Joy, I think you've proven today that you're the expert on that. You get to be cruel and call it journalism. You get to profit off pain and call it accountability. You get to destroy people and call it entertainment. That's having it both ways." With that, Harry removed his microphone, placed it carefully on the table, and walked off the set. The cameras followed him until he disappeared through the studio doors, leaving Joy sitting alone at the table, still speechless, while the studio audience sat in stunned silence. The other co-hosts scrambled to fill the dead air, but nothing they said could erase what had just happened. A member of the British royal family had just systematically dismantled one of America's most feared television personalities, and everyone had watched it happen in real time. What did you think of that epic confrontation? Did Joy go too far, or did Harry deserve the grilling? Subscribe and comment below with your thoughts on who won this battle of words, because this is the kind of television moment that people will be talking about for years to come.